All right, everyone. Welcome to Talent Visionaries. Thank you for joining us. My name is Matt Tague, and we're here with our next installment of the Talent Visionaries web series, where we bring the insights of talent leaders directly to you. So super excited to be here today. We have over 250 registered guests globally. We've got folks in Egypt, in Moldova, in India, all across the US, South America. So truly a global audience today, and we're super lucky to have all of you on the stream. So today's topic, I think, will be a very interesting one. We're going to be talking about amplifying your talent brand and how you can really thrive in a remote environment, especially. So just to kick off, I took a look at some data prior to setting up this event, and I found that there are over 16,000 open talent branding roles on LinkedIn today, just in the US alone. So that's a lot. I think we've all seen it. We've all felt it in the talent space, but there's been more focus on talent branding than ever. So in some ways, it's a great time to be in talent branding, but it's also a really challenging time. Candidates have more opportunities than ever. They're less focused than they've ever been on their job search. It's harder to reach them. And so today we've got three amazing panelists to take us through how they're tackling some of these challenges from an employer brand perspective, to share with us some of their insights and actions. So with that, I'd like to welcome to the stage Emily, Charles, and Andrea.
Hi, everybody.
Fantastic. Welcome, everyone. Fantastic. So we've got Emily from Reef currently and formerly at Facebook. We've got Charles from Stripe and Andrea currently at Upstart and formerly at Twilio, DoorDash, and Lyft. So amazing panel. Super lucky to have these talent brand leaders here with us today. So to kick off, maybe if we could just start, tell us a little bit about current role and what you're most focused on now, talent brand wise. So Emily, I'll throw it over to you.
Hey, Matt. Thanks. Hey, everyone. Emily DeAndre. I lead talent brand as well as employee experience and DEI at Reef. I'm actually fairly new to Reef right now. And so I actually have the incredible opportunity and maybe the somewhat daunting task alongside my team to build out this entire function from the ground up. So it's really exciting to see how all three of these are really interconnected and having them under one umbrella. So we're just deep into strategic planning right now.
Awesome. Fantastic. Welcome. And Charles, we'll throw it over to you.
Hi, everybody. Charles Kirkendall, lead talent brand globally here at Stripe. Come from a sourcing background. I always tell people I'm a sourcer. This talent brand stuff is new. But currently at Stripe, I've been here for almost a year in the next few weeks. And the first 6 months of my tenure here, I had to kind of build the overall talent brand structure and infrastructure and how we want to show up to talent. And I would say at the top of this year, we really focused on executing across a number of talent brand pillars, from job boards, partnerships, different programs and pathways that we now have alignment on our approach to, and also additional events and how to overcome this virtual fatigue that we have going on. So a lot of stuff happening over here.
Awesome. Welcome, Charles. And last but not least, Andrea.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me today. Again, Andrea, my pronouns are she, her. I am currently at Upstart as the head of talent engagement strategy, which basically means that I am starting our employer brand and recruitment marketing function from scratch. So right now, my focus area is really on what is our EVP, developing it, launching it, and then incorporating and using it to launch our employer brand campaigns later this year. So EVP is my number one focus, and then also partnerships. So before we have our EVP and our employer brand sort of defined and in place, how can we use partnerships to build awareness within the local talent communities that we're trying to reach?
Awesome. Fantastic. Yeah, super excited to have this panel. It's a great panel today. So I think to kick off, two of you mentioned EVP, and I think, Charles, your company's, a bit larger, I think it's maybe potentially more established there. But for Emily and for Andrea, I'm curious, how are you going about setting up your EVP? Like, who are you working with? What does that process look like? Can you give us a little bit of detail there? Andrea, why don't you go first? Yeah.
Okay, great. So EVP, employee value proposition, for those who are less familiar with the acronym, is basically the reasons why candidates want to work at your company and why employees stay. And so for us, it's really important to be able to define that and then use it in the messaging and in the narrative that we then use through our marketing channels. And so establishing the EVP is something that I'm currently totally in the weeds with. And so I've traditionally worked with agencies because we haven't had all of the full-time support, but there's so many amazing recruitment marketing agencies out there. And so we are focused on setting up right now all of our interviews, our one-on-ones, as well as our focus groups, sending out surveys to the entire company, and also having conversations with leadership. So typically there's a lot of data collection, a lot of research that goes into it. And then the agency will sort of help us collect all that information and synthesize it into a document. We'll work together with comms, employee engagement, and a number of different departments, marketing, to make sure that it resonates with everyone. It's not just in the sort of recruiting silo, making sure that it does speak to the entire company, since it is for employees as well. And then we'll go ahead and launch that later this year.
Fantastic. Yeah. And I think, we can't forget to mention the marketing partnership. That's part and parcel for talent brand professionals everywhere. But, Emily, I'd love to hear from you. How do you build that relationship with marketing, especially coming in new in the role? What does that look like, building that partnership from the beginning?
Yeah. And first, Andrea, I have to say that was such a lovely, succinct way of kind of spelling out the entire EVP process, which can sometimes seem overwhelming. And I think that you just did that so well and succinctly. The marketing partnership is such a key thing in the work that we do, isn't it? I think as we think about, the consumer storytelling has to be pulled through, right, with our employee storytelling. And it goes the other way around as well. So I think it's about building relationships, just as we do with any other teams, right, is really sitting down with them, understanding what are your priorities for the year? What is on your roadmap? What are you hoping to accomplish? Where can my team potentially add value? And then sharing that back with them so we can really understand areas of mutual opportunity, areas where we can partner and really bring, mutual impact to the table. Such a key and critical partnership in the work that we do.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm curious, Charles, at Stripe, how have you guys approached that? I think, you have a very strong kind of brand at Stripe as well. How do you work with your marketing team there?
Yeah, I mean, the marketing also partners very closely from a recruitment perspective. Everybody has to be in lockstep with each other, because if we're marketing, our company is one way and it goes to what Andrea was saying, whereas people get here and the experience is absolutely different, then we're going to lose talent, especially during the Great Resignation. So we want to be clear about who we want to show up, A, as a product, but B, as a company to hire. And from there, make sure that we are being pretty clear about that externally, but then also doing the work that we need to internally to ensure that all of that is succinct.
Awesome. Yeah, no easy task for sure, but that's super important, definitely. And I think you bring up the Great Resignation, Charles, which I think has been on everyone in the talent space's mind for a while. So I'd love to just hear, we've all been through so much in the last, 2+ years. I think going into the pandemic, talent branding was, very events focused, very, very much an in-person experience in many ways. But I'm curious how each of you have seen the changes in talent brand over the last 2 years. Like, what have you observed? What trends have you seen? Maybe Andrea, let's go with you.
Yeah. So as you know, Matt, I have a background in events. And so I still love events. I think they're so important. So even when we moved to virtual, it was really important for me to figure out how to do this. And so a lot of our events, we did then switch from in-person conferences, in-person partnerships, in-person hosted events to everything virtual. And frankly, I think that's going to stick. I think that we see now how much reach we have virtually. We can reach people globally all in one call if you plan it, at the exact right time for each time zone. And so I do think virtual events are going to stick with us a bit longer. The other change, to your point, is we're trying to reach candidates where they're at. And so email isn't always the best form. Have definitely seen an uptick in texts and the response rates from text messages as well. And so those are two areas where I definitely have seen switches during, the pandemic, during the Great Resignation. And I think those trends will stay with us.
Awesome. Charles, what do you think about that?
Yeah, spot on. And it's just really, when we talk about meeting talent where they are, it's the multiple touch points across a marketing opportunity that you really want to consider. With virtual fatigue, and that's just the nature that we live in. People are tired of sitting in Zoom. What other places can we meet talent where they are virtually or in a hybrid environment? So that looks like, can we leverage Twitter Spaces or Clubhouse? Can we introduce a podcast? Can we do a LinkedIn campaign with a hashtag for people to share their own stories and narratives? So, we want to show up in like a partnership way where your talent community ultimately lies, but also other places and things that might interest you and be able to just like up-level your skill set as a professional. We want you to see us present there, just in your day-to-day work and livelihood and how you approach your job. We want Stripe to also be present there. So I think the nature of this kind of hopefully pandemic thing that we're getting on the back end of is to still kind of maintain some of those learnings that we have kind of shifted our overall perspective in with this virtual environment, but also go back to what we can do that can be in person. There's no replication for like human interaction, right? And still index on those things when we do show up, that it feels stripey, that it feels authentic to who we are. And then like these other spaces and environments, partnerships, programs, pathways, we can just kind of meet you on your own professional journey, making sure that we're doing that as well.
I love that. Yeah. So it's like taking the best elements of in-person, but marrying it with the benefits of virtual. That's very well said. Thank you. Emily, anything you would add to that? Love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all of that. Absolutely. I think maybe one of the biggest changes is just the way that talent brand is now being prioritized and recognized by organizations in a way that it hadn't before. It really does bring so much value, especially as you said, this is a candidate's market, right? We definitely have to stand out. And the challenge is often standing out in a sea of sameness, right? We all are saying we're innovative. We're all saying we're doing amazing things, which is true. But how are we actually showing that and not just telling it? I think the other thing that's changed, as we've all noticed, right, is that candidate motivators are different now. I never heard the words like support and well-being and care in the same way that I hear them now, right? And so it's very important, and Charles touched on this too, that we're really representing those things in our storytelling. But the flip side of that coin is the employee experience, right? If the story is going to talk the talk, that employee experience better walk the walk. And so how are we kind of showing up in that way and making it real and true and authentic?
Yeah, love that. Couldn't agree more with that. Very, very well said. I think it's so true. I think, prior to the pandemic, there was I think digital experiences were happening. I think just the focus wasn't there. It was much more of a focus on in-person events, things like that. But I agree with everyone that it's over the last 2 years, it's really opened the opportunity to see how effective virtual can be done well, right? And I think it has moved the space forward. In terms of using technology, thinking about it more as like a true social presence and how to drive that. So fantastic. Love that. Just a quick call out for the audience as well. So if you have questions for the panelists, we've got a lot of great questions submitted before the event. But if you have any live questions, please go ahead and chime in and we'll be checking for those as well. So look forward to seeing those from the audience there. Excellent. Excellent. Yes. Charles talks the talk when it comes to premier authentic storytelling from Vincent. Thanks. Awesome comment there, Vincent. Thank you for that. Fantastic. Excellent. So I'm curious, we talked a little bit about, I think, Emily, you mentioned this about transparency. And I've seen this trend, I'm sure you've all seen it as well, where companies are kind of uncloaking some of their benefits earlier in the process, right? Where I think traditionally you wouldn't get a lot of that info until you got an offer at a company. And so they're opening up a little bit earlier. And I'm curious if any of you have leveraged that or if you've seen that to be effective to share more about the company earlier in the process there. And Charles, I'd love to hear any experience you have with that.
Well, Matt, the answer is yes. And I think it's going to be yes for everybody. Just the amount of competition that you have for candidates now, given that most location strategies have shifted in some way for almost all companies. Obviously, some are going back in person, but most still have some sort of a hybrid, if not fully remote component added in. So now you were initially, the talent pool might have been a little bit more limited because you might have had to relocate for a job. Now you don't. So what we at Stripe ultimately had to do is say, hey, do we want to just call out? We doubled our company last year. Do we want to call out and say, hey, we're hiring, and just put mass ads and put money behind all of that? Or do we want to say, hey, is our goal really just to increase overall top of funnel, or is it to decrease the overall top of funnel by being strategic in our messaging and increasing candidate quality and time to hire? And we took the latter approach. And so while we have great benefits, we pay extremely fair. Is that the messaging that we want to put out there from a talent brand perspective? Or do we want our messaging that might speak to a different candidate that says, hey, you come here, you're going to be challenged. You're going to up-level your skill set by working with incredibly smart people. You're going to have opportunity to enjoy remote work, but still feel very much connected to a company culture? Do we want to lean into that storytelling? So while we do have great benefits, and those are things that we do want to kind of showcase, to a candidate because it matters in this climate, the initial upfront messaging for us, we determined to be a little bit more strategic. So we're not doing a massive call out, but we're speaking to the core values of the individual that align with the core values of the company.
Got it. So you got to hook them with the overall prop first, the value of why work there, and then the benefits are more of a supplement after they've, they're aware and you're engaging them on a deeper level.
You got it, Matt. Stop trying to take my job, Matt. You said that really well, man.
Emily, what do you think?
I've seen transparency kind of move in a somewhat different direction. I think there used to be sort of this perception that it's so secretive to get hired at some of these companies, right? It's so challenging and, it's all under lock and key. And I think what I've seen though, is that is sort of, you said the curtain starting to lift. And I think this is so fantastic. And I love this opportunity here, right? Especially as we think about diverse candidates. We know that diverse candidates, I will say myself included as a woman, we often self-deselect. And what opportunities do we have to remove the barriers to entry, right, when it comes to the recruiting process? And I'm a huge believer, not just in talent brand being top of funnel, but what are our opportunities to really engage mid funnel? And how do we equip our recruiting teams and hiring managers with the tools and resources they need to be able to do that? And I think this is such a great evolution, honestly, of recruiter Q&A, recruiter really talking about how to get hired. Interview prep content is coming out in ways we never saw it before. Connection points between hiring managers and ERGs and actual candidates. This is meaningful engagement that really benefits the candidate. It doesn't have to be about us. It shouldn't be about us. It's about the candidate and how do we enable them to be able to join companies, maybe not even just our company, but companies in general. And I just love that transparency piece.
Fantastic. And I think that's such an important point, Emily. I think most people, myself included, would often think of talent brand as purely a top of funnel initiative. How do you get people in the door? How do you get them interested? And I love that call out there of it not just being top of funnel, it's also mid funnel as well, right? How do you keep them, especially in this competitive environment, engaged in that process through some of those ways you mentioned? I think that's a super key call out there. Excellent. Andrea, what's your experience? What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with everything both Charles and Emily said. And so I think the one thing I would sort of double down on is making sure that we're using our branding to give the candidates what they need and what they want. And recognizing that not every company can compete on benefits. There are companies that aren't offering millions of dollars in fertility and mental health and, all of these things, which, frankly, I value and I think we should, but not every company does offer these things. So I do also think as talent brand professionals, we have to have an honest conversation with our people ops team, with our HR benefits team to say, okay, if these are not the benefits that we can afford to offer at this time, what can we offer? What are we to highlight? And so maybe it's highlighting the fact that you're going to have exponential career growth, or it's highlighting the fact that you're going to have work-life balance. So I know there has been a lot of push recently around what are your perks and benefits? How many days do you get off? How much parental leave do you have? But if you can't compete in that space, I do think it's really important to find what you can compete in.
Totally. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think you got to go with what you have and amplify what you've got there. But I'm curious too, I think, Charles, you mentioned surveys earlier as a way to get that, employee surveys. But Andrea, where do you go to get that type of insight beyond surveys? Anything you're doing to understand what that is for your company? today?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to undervalue surveys. I think they're incredibly important, but I do think having a pulse on the community, on the networks internally. So whether it's joining ERG meetings or seeing how the comments for employees reacting in your all company meetings, or even just having one-on-ones with people across the business, just being in the know is very important for our jobs, especially when you're at a company that has a really wide mix of employees, a mix of salary versus hourly, a mix of, call center versus engineering and marketing. Being able to have relationships with people across the business to know what folks are talking about that they might not feel comfortable putting into a survey.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Yeah. And I think speaking of, ERGs and leveraging that as such an important, and I think in some companies underutilized resource in the recruiting, motion of many companies. And I'm curious, one of the topics that came in from our viewers that they wanted to know most about is, especially in this environment, how do you generate engagement with diverse audiences? What does that look like? How has it changed? What's working now? I'd love to hear from anyone on the panel what you're seeing and what's effective right now.
Yeah, it goes back to what Andrea kind of said earlier, which is meeting talent where they are, especially from underrepresented communities, and showing up authentically when you're there. You know what I mean? So if I want to do a targeted event that's going to be focused on Black engineering, then I need to show up, you know what I mean, with a diverse representation of Stripe. And so what that means is partnering with our Stripe community. And we consider them employee resource groups, but as important as it is to be employee focused and led to make sure our experience is good, they kind of also need to be in tandem with business resource group to assist in hiring goals. And so you fuse that together. If you're showing up at a Afro Tech and you're doing a Black engineering event, partner with the Black Stripes. You know what I'm saying? So that you're showing up in that space authentically. But for us, like, we have to put money where our mouth is and invest in these talent communities. And it's not just about showing up. It's like, what are you doing when you're there? And are you up leveling the talent? Like I called this out a little bit earlier, that just our overall methodology is not just to just hire people. We want to up level your career, whether you join Stripe or not. So I want our engineers doing a info session or talking about pathways into security engineering from different backgrounds, you know what I mean, to empower that talent community to know the opportunities that could ultimately exist for them. So showing up, being authentic, and leveraging the internal resources that you have to show up to that community in an authentic way.
Awesome. Love that. And Emily, I'm curious from your perspective, are you working with ERGs, or have you done that previously? And any tips or tricks you have to, build those relationships and work with them to get them involved in the overall talent brand process?
Yeah, always such key partners. And Charles, I love what you just said about the up level piece. I couldn't agree more. I think what's also cool, I'm going to segue, Matt, I'm sorry. I'll come back to this, but I think what's also really
floor is yours.
What's also really cool is we also up level our own employees with those experiences when we offer opportunities to be featured on panels, right? And to be in blogs and that sort of thing, because our job is not just about, bringing talent in. It's also about retention. I mean, we have to tell our own stories to our employees every single day and continue to retain them here. And offering those kinds of opportunities is so critical and key. Back to the ERG question. Yes, I'm actually very lucky right now. I'm building out ERGs at Reef, our very first group of ERGs. And so I'm very excited to be part of that process from the ground up. However, in previous roles, though, very connected to them, and Andrea called this out too, the importance of actually attending meetings and showing up as an ally as well. You really have a great way to get connected with participants, but not just people to feature, with people that are going to tell you what stories we need to tell. I'm not always going to know what those stories are, and those individuals are going to help lift them up and really ensure that we're telling the ones that are most meaningful and powerful to our potential candidates and to our internal audiences. Also, it's a great way to figure out what partnerships should we be considering, what events should we be going to, where should we actually be, and what kind of meaningful engagement are we going to provide when we get there? How are we going to up level those people? And that's the only way we can do it, is by listening and learning.
Awesome. Love that.
Yeah.
Andrea, anything to add to that? Or?
Yes. So as a former ERG leader and someone who has managed and kicked off ERGs, I have a lot to say, but I will say it concisely. I will first start off by saying our ERG leaders are such incredible resources, who should be paid. And we should utilize them, to Emily's point, to be able to highlight stories, to be able to highlight employees that should be spotlit, to highlight partnerships, etc. But it's really important that we are not just tapping on them as resources, we're giving back to them as well. So how can we help the ERGs? Maybe they want to do a sourcing campaign and they want to learn more about recruiting, or maybe they want to host their own event and we can help them with that. So I just want to flag and call out that our ERGs are often overutilized, under-resourced, underpaid, overlooked. And so if we can give back to them for giving us so much as well, I definitely want to bring that up. And then also, going back to your point about what is resonating with underrepresented communities authentically. So I think it's really important when we're doing events, when we're having campaigns, it's not just about saying like, Black in tech, what it's like to be a Black woman in tech, what it's like to be Native in tech. Like, we need to have deeper, more authentic conversations about, I've done events in the past around personal finances. A lot of underrepresented folks are the first in their families, in their communities, to make X amount of money or to work at these large companies. So let's talk about how to manage those finances now that you have access to them. So taking the conversation a level deeper has really resonated with our audiences.
Awesome. I love that. Yeah, I think if I'm thinking about it, like Coinbase has done really well with that. So they've got a whole series focused on engaging diverse audiences for employment around crypto, right? And like what crypto means to them or could mean to them. And I think that's a perfect example of what you're talking about there, Andrea. And yeah, definitely agree with all the points about ERG resourcing, plus 100 to all of that. It's a labor of love and it has to be a mutual benefit, right? We can't always be asking for things from them. We have to give back as well. So love that call out, definitely. Want to shift it a little bit to technology here. So a lot of questions from the audience about technology. And I know, Emily, we've been together at Microsoft previously. You spent a lot of time at Facebook. I'm curious, from a talent brand perspective, what technologies are you looking at, whether that's channels or marketing platforms, whatever that is, what's top of mind for you?
That's interesting. I was thinking about all of the experience that I've had, at larger tech companies. I was at Microsoft, I was at Facebook, trying to think about what were the great pieces of tech that I've brought with me. And I'm going to take it in a totally different direction that's maybe unexpected. I have to tell you, when I first started in this space, resourcing and budget in the tech was actually pretty limited. And because it was a long time ago, right? 10 years ago. And so we had to be scrappy. Even at Microsoft, we had to be scrappy with what we had available to us. So I think what I really took with me is that, listen, big budgets are great. I love having big budgets available. However, scrappy and grassroots approaches, they actually can be really effective as we think about brand overall, right? Because we know that we have people as our resource. And I think as we think about the opportunities to really leverage our people as employee advocates, that's a space that I think there still is a lot of room for growth, right? Especially as we think about research telling us, right, that brands don't trust brands, or people don't trust brands, rather, they trust people. And so what are those opportunities, I think, that we can leverage the voices of our people, especially the people that maybe that don't have that spotlight shown on them as much? That's really where I feel like I've kind of found that win-win overall. So not from a tech perspective, but actually really tapping into the realness and the authenticity and the human side of our people and empowering them to really tell their stories and lift up their own voices. So I know that's not the tech side of the house, but it honestly is my greatest lesson, I think, from starting off at Microsoft and seeing how you can pull that thread through no matter where you are. The people are really the greatest asset that we have.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, tech without the people is not gonna move the needle there for sure. So that makes sense. Excellent. Charles, how about you? What, tech wise or people wise, what do you think on that?
Yeah, it's a lot. So from my side, I just firmly believe in like data-driven decision making, and it's very difficult when you have to build something from scratch, which I did last year. So it's just really putting the infrastructure in place. Like, how do we want to measure sentiment analysis? There's so much information out there that Stripe isn't owning. There is Glassdoor, there is Candor, there is wow, why's my mind going blank? Blind, et cetera, right? So how do we measure that and measure the impact of some of the things that we might be doing to offset any negative noise that might be out there? In addition, when we do think about talent attraction and the funnel, we use a system like GEM. which is super helpful for our purposes of being able to create two-way communication and track the multiple touch points and where and how we ultimately want to show up. But yeah, any tool in the system, and also I manage a global team. So you think about follow the sun methods and how we want to keep in contact and keep our projects on schedule and set. So it's like Airtable, Asana, and that type of software that makes it a lot easier to keep things on track. And then also, I think I have one more thing to say. I'm losing my train of thought. And then the technological advances that go along with the virtual elements of event production. So is there a platform that you want to use to show up? Do you want to do Go Hopping versus Zoom? Do you want to have a tool that can assist in self-led employee content generation versus, than just pre-recording on Zoom? And so those are all the things that we're now exploring now that we built the infrastructure to say, hey, this is how we want to show up. These are our, principal guidelines of, how we want to talk about this place authentically. Now we want to empower you to talk. And then these are the technical tools that you can lean into, whether that is, I keep going, but like we spoke about a little earlier, Twitter Spaces and those other formats that we can meet talent where they are. So, but we also want to measure everything and have data on the how and why. So
awesome. I love that. So it's the people part that Emily mentioned, and then scaling that with some of the tools that you mentioned. So that's fantastic. Andrea, what are you seeing? What's your experience?
Yeah. So, Matt, you did not pay me to say this, but like Charles mentioned, I also use Gem quite a bit.
You need a discount.
I've used it in the past to manage our talent network. So being able to use it as like a very easy way to send people a link to sign up and then send emails right in the same system. So that's been really helpful. From an event perspective, I use Splash that. They're built for event marketers and like field marketers, but I've worked a lot with them and that we use a lot of the same resources. So Splash, huge shout out to Ben, has been a really great product and a great team to work with at honestly every company that I've been at. And then also employee advocacy tools. The name of the tool I've used is escaping me, but being able to have something to amplify the message, to Emily's point, with candidates trusting employees more has been really useful.
Awesome. Fantastic. What about other kind of social media platforms? So you mentioned a couple, Charles, Twitter Spaces, Clubhouse. I think those are really innovative. I think people are interested to hear how you're using those. But what about like, TikTok or Snap or more video focused, consumable content? I'm curious if anyone has experimented with that and any learnings you have from it.
I can jump in. Honestly, one of my favorite phrases, I think, for people that are starting off in talent brand, and I'll be looking forward to hearing from Charles and Andrea on this as well, but it's not where you are, it's why you are. And so really thinking about before jumping into any new platform is to be thinking about who's your audience. Are they going to be there and what are they going to want? Why should we show up there? Not just because everybody else is there, but why? What are we hoping to achieve? So I think if you think about any new tools and you say, their demographics are really well aligned with our audience personas. And to Charles's point, there is a way to measure engagement. We are actually going to be able to invest and then we can measure success. I say, sure, jump in. Why not? Try something new, right? And see. Then you can use that to inform future strategies. I personally do love TikTok and Reels for employer brand. I think it's really fun from a user-generated content perspective. I've actually seen success on both of those for generating event invitations and attendees. I do think, though, as we think about tried and true ways, I personally don't see LinkedIn going away or InMails or outreach from recruiters, but I think it's really fun to be able to try kind of user-generated pieces to humanize our brands and lift the curtain while also ensuring that we're able to measure success.
Love that. Charles, Andrea, anything to add?
I was just going to say, I haven't done a lot of testing, and so I'm over here taking notes myself. So Charles, I'll pass it to you.
I also haven't done a lot of testing, but I have my preconceived notion, and again, trying to have data-driven decision making. I created a talent persona internally just to kind of check my bias to see where and how we should show up. So I'll use the partnership with the Stripe community, for example, our Black Stripes. Historically underrepresented talent, Stripe level talent, because they're working here. So that's the talent persona that I wanted to reach. And I said, hey, what social channel should we show up at? I just assumed that it was going to be Instagram because I think that's a huge opportunity for life at Stripe sort of a situation. And I put it there and I was just waiting for the survey to come back and validate my perspective. That was probably the fourth lowest. It was LinkedIn. It was Glassdoor. And I was like, wait, what? Are you serious? And so I then realized there was a miss in how we're showing up on LinkedIn. Yeah, we have our jobs listed. We're not really doing employee-led content on LinkedIn. And I was so focused on, the opportunity that exists in Twitter and Instagram, where we just haven't even explored yet, that I'm missing low-hanging fruit that exists on the platform we invest heavily in. And so we built our own campaign this year called #MyStripeStory, and opened up an opportunity for us to kind of talk about leveling up that, how it happens at Stripe. And so I do think that while some of those more innovative solutions like TikTok could potentially be roadmap, especially when you think about attracting Gen Z talent, they have a whole different way of thinking. We could talk about that later. But for, what we're currently focused on, our 2022 priorities, LinkedIn and Glassdoor and some of those more traditional channels seem to be the right places to show up. It's just the how and the why.
Totally. Love that. Yeah. It's not always about the new tool necessarily. It's about, I love that point about, surveying your own people internally to figure out, like, where would they look? What do they care about? Right. And using that as your North Star versus just adding on new tools to try new tools. So love that point. We have a question from the audience. So one of our audience members wants to know if each of you see the industry shifting to more automated approaches or not. Right. So we talked about the role of technology. We're using more technology. We're hybrid, we're remote, we're all of these things. Do you see talent branding getting more automated going forward or not? Love to hear each of your thoughts on that.
I can jump in. So I think it's going to be important to have balance. If we automate things and they look automated, we are going to sort of take away from the exact feelings we're trying to evoke with, especially like onboarding new talent and candidates coming in. So I definitely think that while technology is here to help us, we want to make sure that we're still humanizing the process as much as possible. So even if it is like a mail merge or something, having it signed with someone's name and not just signed the recruiting team or the onboarding team. So I do see the shift, but I am a little hesitant about it, is I guess what I would say.
Totally. Emily, what are your thoughts?
I agree. Straight up. I think there is some interest in it, of course, from a scaling perspective, right? But we don't ever want to lose that human touch. I also think that it could be detrimental with some candidates, especially we have so much research and data that shows that for a lot of our senior level candidates, there's a white glove experience that's expected there, or an opportunity to really kind of have that personalization and ensure that that happens all the way through the funnel, including the employee journey. And so I do think, as Andrea said, it's really about balance. How can we scale, but ensure that we don't lose any sort of like personalized experiences throughout?
Definitely. Charles?
Yeah, they hit it spot on. It's that balance and continuing to show up authentically. There's a world where Text Expander was my best friend when I was a source. So let me be very clear. I'm not trying to use my fingers that much, but it's like, what are those personalized inputs that you can have that still make it unique and authentic to say a person? I didn't personally do it, so I can't take credit for this, but there was a sourcer who traditionally came from engineering, but pivoted into recruiting, that would code a message to an engineer. I'm like, I gave the talent a gem right there, because if I was still sourcing, I would have somebody come up with a snippet for me. But you know what I mean? Like, in the coding language of their choice, that is pure genius, and it's setting you apart from the hundreds of thousands of companies that everybody has access to, because you can literally just self-select if you want to go Series A through C, you want to go pre-IPO, you want to go public. Like, you can kind of work in any company you want. It is a buyer's market right now. So how are you still showing up authentically and making that connection to set your company apart?
Yeah, love that. Because there's definitely that danger if you go too far down the path of automation and you lose that human touch, as I think all of you alluded to. Like, it works until it doesn't, right? And when it doesn't, it can be very bad. So I think that's a key point as we look at technologies and automation in the space, for sure. And just to keep on that topic, so Charles, I'll stick with you for this one as well. You've touched on data-driven recruiting several times today, which I think is key. I think a lot of talent brand teams struggle with how to measure their success. Like, what does success look like? What are the measurements for it? And I'm curious, for each of you, but to start with Charles, what metrics do you look at? Like, how do you know that you're successful in your role?
Well, I went through a review. So sometimes, I come from recruiting where it's exact. I sourced this many hires. Mm-hmm. My team sourced this many hires. We got this many offer extends. And so that's kind of why I was probably given the opportunity to shift into this space, because that is the closing lens in which I'm approaching all of this more creative work. And again, it was a learning, it was a building, like, hey, the life cycle for the things that we do is not going to manifest itself in a 2-3 week timeline post event. Like, there will be some that do immediately enter the funnel, and we do want to showcase that in the QBR, quarterly business review. But then what I'm doing literally March 31st, the close of our Q1, is I looked at all of our 2021 talent brand initiatives, events that we did, and then looked at the new applications that started from January to March of this year. So you have to look at it in multiple different kind of segments. And then for the things that we're doing live currently, that's brand, I'm looking at click-through rates. I'm looking at the time spent on some of the splash landing pages that we piloted to have more team-owned narratives. Like, okay, people are spending 5-6 minutes learning about this specific team. That gives opportunity for more scale. So I'm always looking at things from a data mindset, but those numbers are not going to tell the entire story, because my goal along this candidate journey of multiple touch points is in 2024, we're hiring somebody that we first made interaction with when I joined in May of 2021. That to me is still a win, but we still have to show those milestones along the way that we are constantly, consistently adding value. I'm sorry, this is so much.
No, I see a lot of head nods in the panelists here, but Andrea, what are your thoughts on metrics and success measurement for talent brand?
Yeah, I agree with everything Charles said. The way I think about it, so typically in employer or talent brand, you either come from recruiting or you come from marketing. There are some people who come from other spaces, but I would say those are the majority of folks. So I come from marketing and events. And so my brain is immediately like, okay, what sort of marketing event metrics can I add? And then recruiting metrics, in my eyes, frankly, are a little bit easier to generate, because I have tags for days in Greenhouse. I have sources very neatly set up, like being able to pull the recruiting metrics is sometimes a little bit easier, in fact, than the marketing event metrics. But it's important to have both, I think, is what the call out is, and what Charles was echoing as well. Making sure we have things that echo the sentiment and the change in sentiment, making sure we can see the click-through rates, as well as, number of event registrants and attendees, the NPS score after events, the number of views on posts, and et cetera, et cetera. I can go on forever, but the balance, again, of both event marketing and recruiting metrics is important.
Awesome. Emily, anything to add there?
I agree wholeheartedly with both. I think for me, it's just maybe just sharing a bit of a learning I've had since I've been at several companies doing this for a long time. I think that was a miss I had and had to learn from at Microsoft, frankly, that Andrea, I'm like you, I come from a marketing background. And it took me a long time, honestly, to get to the point where I understood that my recruiting teams were asking me, but so what? But so what? I don't really care how many impressions you have. So what? And I'm like, what do you mean? So what? Here's the benchmark. Look what we achieved. And it really was something that I, had to kind of grow and learn and sit down with my partners and understand they really don't care about that. They really do just care about the recruiting metrics. So we need to have both, but we need to be able to, in my opinion, ditch the marketing speak when we're speaking to our TA partners, right? And really be able to come to the table with, here was what our mutually agreed upon recruiting targets are. Here is how we achieved them, or here is why we didn't. And then what did the handoff look like to your team? Where did the recruiting partners pick that up? And how did we come at that, from a sort of collaboration perspective? Because the most successful talent brand campaigns are in deep collaboration with our recruiting teams, if ultimately, applicants or hires are our goals. So I think that's just what I've learned. Have the marketing metrics, but know who you're talking to and bring the right metrics and the right language to the table.
100%. Yeah, I think we've all seen versions of that movie at different companies where it's a different language, right? Just like sales and marketing is different. I think in the sales and marketing context, people intuitively understand what marketing does, what sales does. But in recruiting has historically done kind of a little bit of everything, right? And there's not that clear distinction, or there hasn't been. So a lot of it is working with TA partners to help them think about marketing metrics and translating those, as you mentioned, Emily, into a language that makes sense, for them, so they can see, how does this help me today? How will this help me tomorrow? And then, per your point, Charles, thinking about that longer term, like it's an investment. It's not a 1 week initiative that's going to yield a hire next week. Just like a marketing campaign for a product wouldn't do that necessarily. It's going to be a quarters or months versus days and weeks that it might be for recruiting there. So love all of those points for sure there. Excellent. So just to shift a little bit here. So Andrea, I want to show this question to you here, and that's you and I have had the chance to work on some events in the past. You throw amazing events. Like when I think of events, I think of you. And a lot of folks in the chat are chiming in saying the exact same thing. So you're well known for that there. I wanted you to add a little bit more. You talked about virtual plus in person. And so how are you thinking about the future of events? Like, what do you think is going to matter remainder of this year and next year?
Yeah, thank you so much for the kind words. I really appreciate that. Events are important to bring the brand to life. It is the easiest way, in my opinion, for someone to feel tangibly what your employer brand is, what it's like to work there, how your employees feel and interact together. And so whether it's in person, virtual, or hybrid, there's so much opportunity to sort of optimize in these different spaces. I work at Upstart now, which is a digital first company, which is amazing, meaning that we hire folks all over the country, no matter where they're located. And with that, we have the huge opportunity to really leverage the hybrid events. And I got a question today from a recruiter saying, hey, why aren't we doing more localized events? We used to do events in this city or this city. And now that we have access to talent all over the country, why would we not optimize and take this opportunity to really reach as many people as possible? So I think that as much hybrid and virtual as we can do, while also balancing in person at different conferences and through different partnerships, is going to be important moving forward. And then being able to host your own events and not always have to conform to the restrictions of partners or conferences. So at Lyft, when Matt and I were together, we hosted a lot of events at our campus or office, we said office, sorry, at our office or at a Black-owned bar, a woman-owned bar down the street. And so being able to really fully control the experience and not just always have a booth or have, a speaker at a conference, like being able to control it from start to finish was really important to highlight our brand. And I definitely think that accessibility is an important call out here as well. Having hybrid events allows folks, especially like caretakers and folks with different disabilities, to be able to participate in a more holistic way, in ways that perhaps they wouldn't be able to do if it was after work in person. So from the accessibility standpoint, I also think that hybrid and virtual events have been a game changer.
Love that. Yeah, I think, going back to pre-pandemic times, I've been to so many events that were just strictly in person only. Like no thought was given to how do you extend the event digitally. And I think we've seen the opportunity of that. You touched on that, Andrea, of, even if you're going to hold an in-person office event, today we would look at that and say, how do we extend that digitally? Do we stream it on YouTube? Do we put it on a channel like we're on right now and engage more people than are able to, physically attend the event there? So I think that's such an important call out for sure. Charles, Emily, anything you'd add to Andrea's points there?
I just had a thought, actually, I wanted to share, and I'd love to get, Andrea, I know you're deep into events. I'd love to get your perspective on this as well. One thing that we noticed on our team back when I was at Facebook, once we moved to all kind of virtual events, is suddenly we seem to get more vulnerability on the stage. It was virtual, right? So people were coming from their own homes. And it seemed that people really let some realness out and some of that vulnerability and kind of authenticity in a way that didn't seem to show up. Maybe it's stage fright, right? You're in front of a room of 300 people. Here I'm at home, I have my sweatpants and slippers on, so maybe it allows for a little bit more of that realness to kind of come through. And it was beautiful. It was actually a great way to be able to showcase the, inner workings of Facebook life in a way that we hadn't before. And also, to your point, that was able to reach so many more people. And I loved that. I don't want to ever lose that because it was such a great thing. Did you notice that at all? Or have you noticed that at all with any events?
So I wonder if that has more to do with sort of similarly to how candidates are challenging companies now on what benefits are you offering? How are you like protecting my mental health? What is the work-life balance? I wonder if it has more to do with that than the actual virtual versus in person. So I have seen it, and I think that from my perspective, it's been candidates who have been sort of more empowered to ask the questions that they were afraid to ask before, and employees to be more honest in the conversations than they felt like they could be before.
Well said. I could absolutely agree with that. Yeah.
Awesome. Fantastic. We've got a follow-on question from the audience for something that we covered a little bit earlier. Emily, I'll throw this to you. You talked about, not just talent brand, not just being top of funnel focused, but also engaging through the process. So the audience wants to know, like, what recommendations, swag, meet and greets, like how are you engaging people through the process versus just getting them aware of the process in the beginning?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the question. I think it's actually about recruiter enablement. I think that's a huge piece of the talent brand body of work that isn't always recognized or isn't always as built out in the way that it could be. So I think it's really ensuring that our recruiters have what they need to be able to take the talent brand message directly to the candidates, right? They're the boots on the ground and they're the ones that are interacting with them immediately. So this may be, building out recruiting narratives. Do they have all the talking points that they need to be able to, address key issues or things that their candidates are concerned about? Do they have toolkits so they're easily able to, take our design assets, to take our stories and be able to share them to their own networks and to candidates directly? Are we giving them ways to be able to measure those things as well? Are we providing them with unique links or recommending that they use those so we can actually see how people are engaging with that content? Are we asking them the things that they need, right? Do they need swag? Do they actually need trainings for their hiring managers in terms of telling those stories or being able to interview, or hiring managers being able to share and advocate for themselves? So I think it's really about enabling and empowering our recruiting teams to be able to bring these messages effectively to the candidates, and then in turn they are able to scale that to hiring managers.
Awesome. Love that. Charles, Andrea, anything to add to Emily's points about mid-funnel engagement there?
Yeah, Emily's spot on with the mid-funnel, just as equally as important as top of funnel. We partner very closely with the businesses to kind of diagnose what problems are existing, and then we come up with the innovative solution to address it. So if I'm looking through pass-through rates on site to offer consistently not happening, then we need to be focusing something on some content that's going to assist there. Is it a splash landing page where people think that, hypothetically speaking, Stripe is more engineer focused than product management focused, or product managers don't want to work here and they get into offer and not actually converting to hire? What can we do to kind of offset that? So it's really, I let the data again kind of drive where we partner with the business, but we really try and diagnose the problem and come up with an innovative solution to address it mid-funnel. But there's other ways that you can partner and engage from mid to close, and partner with Stripe communities to have different ERG members speak to candidates about things that they want to talk about in a safe space. And we speak about how much candidates are empowered now to ask the tough questions before they get in the door. They want to be sure that they want to work here. So how can we partner with our Stripe community and get those questions answered? How can we own the narrative and give them the information that they want to know? So mid-funnel stuff from talent brand is equally as important as top of funnel.
Awesome. Andrea?
And just to add on swag, so for me, this is like a very polarizing topic. People love or they hate swag. I personally think that swag without intention is a waste of money and it ends up in landfills. So much so that I started my own swag business that focuses all on products from Black and Latinx small businesses. And so my thoughts and recommendations with swags is like, be intentional. Why are you sending the shirt? Why are you sending these socks? Like, is it just to get more brand recognition? Or how can we make it feel more personalized? If you know someone has a small child at home, are we sending them a onesie? If we know somebody really appreciates the values of sustainability, making sure that the swag is all compostable in the pack, or the packaging is all compostable. So getting really specific and aligning with the values of the company as well as the person receiving it, I think is really important to stand out. And one other last call out, when I just started at Upstart about 2 months ago. And when I got my offer, rather than getting a box of nothingness that I frankly was going to donate, or it was going to end up with someone else, I received flowers from a local Black-owned florist from my manager. And that was the most powerful message that I have received, like, ever. Like, the fact that I didn't get some just crap, and she knew enough about me to know how meaningful this would be and did the research, not even living in the same city that I did. Like, that is what closes candidates, not extra socks.
Love that. Fantastic. Getting a lot of love in the chat, Emily, for your original answer there. And Andrea, I think let's carve out a moment for a plug here. A lot of people want to know about this company. Where can they find out more info?
Absolutely. The company is called Swag by Asayo, Asayo. And we are sending out gift boxes that feature all products from Black and Latinx small business owners. So mugs, body butter, candle, tea, coffee. I could go on forever, but it's been really fun. We launched, it's my little COVID baby. So we launched in November 2020. And I've learned a lot about the swag business, again, which is why I have very strong opinions. But if anyone's interested, thank you so much for dropping my website in the chat. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Yeah. Everyone on the stream, please reach out if interested. That sounds like a great thing to check out. Fantastic. Excellent. Wanted to shift a little bit to Charles. So, Charles, you've talked a little bit about the power of data in your work, and I love how you're connecting your work with downstream recruiting outcomes. The other part of your work that you haven't talked as much about is the global part. So I'd love to hear, Stripe's doing a lot of growth globally. Like, how are you thinking about either like messaging or data or any of the areas you're focused on from a global perspective? What's top of mind for you there?
Yeah, so we're a global company. We're dual headquartered in both San Francisco and Dublin. And while we come up with global infrastructure, you have to be in lockstep from a localization standpoint and have boots on the ground and have those early morning meetings with EMEA, have those late meetings with APAC. We are hiring in India. And to be frank, I don't know everything. So we work very, very, very closely with each region to understand what partnerships make sense, what programs ultimately make sense, what events that we need to show up at. And it's just so crucial not to, be America specific and really let the globalization of your company kind of shine through. When you think about diversity overall, that shows up differently in each region. That has different meaning everywhere. And there's a level of authenticity that you can only get by partnering with the people in that region. You have things such as GDPR that guide how you can engage with candidates in other regions. So it's just so important that you partner closely and have a localized strategy while having a global infrastructure for the work that we do.
Awesome. Love that. Yeah. And I think there's so many parallels with like general diversity recruiting in the US, right? Applying some of those same learnings there of, be smart about your outreach, make sure it resonates, engages, all of those things. They're certainly harder to do globally, right? Because time zones and all those things, but same principles for sure. Andrea, Emily, would you add anything there from a global perspective?
Yeah, I think it's really important also to just define how you're approaching those local markets. So for example, when I worked at Twilio, we had offices in 16 different countries. So were we going to these other countries as in a US, like an American company that had an office in Estonia? Or were we an Estonian company just like we were an American company and a Singaporean company? So being able to define the approach really is helpful in the narrative as well.
100%.
Agree. I think too, this just comes back to all of our work is about listening. It's really about tapping into what we're hearing from our employees, what we're hearing from our candidates, and knowing that we are telling the stories that need to be told at the right time in the right place. And we're not going to know that if we don't listen or if we make assumptions, right? It is so important to have those focus groups with our global teams, to have those focus groups with our ERGs, to really ensure that we know what our employees are saying, what they're feeling, and what they want to hear about. Those nuances matter. And those conversations make the difference in our work, I think.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, we're almost at the hour here. This has been an amazing session. I think we have time for one more question from the audience. If anyone wants to drop one in there, that'd be great. But I know I've learned a ton speaking with everyone today. It's been so great to hear about partnerships with ERGs. How do you build messages that resonate? How you're leveraging technology, but also maintaining personalization. And then I think the call out, Andrea, of like the hybrid in-person events, right? Leveraging like digital in-person events and really scaling that experience. So tons of great insights. I think our audience has been very interested to hear what everyone has had to say today. So with that, I would love to give the panelists a very warm thank you and welcome. It's been a pleasure, and thank you. Lots of love in the chat. So thank you all for joining us today. Excellent. And so with that, to our audience, I'd love to say thank you again for joining us on Talent Visionaries. So this is an ongoing series of thought leadership from talent leaders directly to you. If you want to learn more, please go to gem.com/talent visionaries. We'll have that on the screen in a moment here. You can sign up. We've got tons of articles. You can learn about our new sessions. Super excited to hear from all of you. What other topics do you want to hear about? Who else should we speak with? Those are all things we want to hear. So please go ahead and check it out. And thanks, everyone, and have a great day. Take care, everyone.